You are listening to The Testimonial, a podcast of critical essays bearing witness to the forces that shape our world. We conduct historical autopsies, expose hidden systems, and decode the profound truths within culture, politics, and the seemingly whimsical. Each episode is a deep dive, a forensic investigation. This is The Evidence. You are about to hear the testimony on America as a serial killer factory, the cultural alchemy that manufactures serial killers.
Welcome. This is the story of a factory and its anatomy of a uniquely American product. Now, we're not talking about cars or widgets here. We're talking about a product whose brand is terror, often hidden behind a mask of complete normalcy. So today, we're not hunting monsters. We're inspecting the assembly line that built them. You know the names: Bundy, Gacy, Dahmer. They're infamous. But what if they aren't just horrible anomalies? What if they're actually the logical, predictable output of a specific national machinery? Okay, let's dive right into this idea.
So to really understand this factory, you gotta look at its blueprint. And it was built over a century from three, uniquely American materials. First, you have the frontier myth. The lone man solving his problems with a gun, celebrated as a hero. Then came the Industrial Revolution, which gave us these huge, anonymous cities where a person could literally just vanish without anyone even noticing. And the final piece of the puzzle, the masterstroke, the interstate highway system, a massive national network that basically became a predator's perfect delivery route.
With this whole foundation in place, the factory's product was so distinct it actually needed a brand new name. The term serial killer was only coined in the 1970s by an FBI agent named Robert Ressler. He realized that calling these guys mass murderers just didn't quite fit. He needed a new label for this systematic kind of predator, whose real motive wasn't money or revenge, but just the pure psychological gratification he got from the act itself.
So with the blueprint set, the factory just went into mass production. During what we now call the golden age of serial murder, the FBI estimated there could be as many as 100 active serial killers in the United States at any given moment. Just think about that, 100. That's a terrifying peak, and it was uniquely American.
Okay, so if this factory has a blueprint, how does it actually assemble a killer? Well, it turns out there's this horrifyingly consistent four-step process. Let's take a look at the assembly line step by step.
First, the factory needs its raw material. And almost without fail, it's a tortured child, someone who has suffered unimaginable abuse and neglect. That trauma then forges this internal fantasy world. It becomes a mental blueprint for violence. Then, step 3 is the cultural script. American mass media, everything from true detective magazines to slasher films, basically hands them an instruction manual. And finally, the hunting ground, a society of strangers, connected by these anonymous highways and sprawling suburbs, provides the perfect stage for their final, deadly performance.
This really shows you that the killer isn't born, but forged. And the factory's efficiency, it seems, depends on targeting the people that society has already deemed disposable. I mean, listen to Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. He just chillingly admitted his strategy. He said he picked prostitutes because he thought he could kill as many as he wanted without ever getting caught. He knew the system had a bias. Which brings us to the factory's flawed quality control system, apathy.
A product this dangerous should never, ever make it off the factory floor. So why did it? Again and again and again. The answer seems to lie in a system that wasn't just incompetent, but was permissively apathetic. It just let it happen. You see, the system's failures weren't random. They were actually built on this foundation of bias that basically determined whose life was worth investigating, whose disappearance was worth a headline, and whose family even deserved answers in the first place.
And here are the pillars of that failure. You had jurisdictional chaos, right? A killer like Ted Bundy could just cross a state line and basically become invisible to the last police force that was hunting him. Then there's victim bias. When marginalized people vanished, their cases were often dismissed or ignored. Resources were diverted to the so-called war on drugs, leaving serial murder cases chronically underfunded. And finally, you had investigative myopia, just a complete failure by these siloed departments to connect the dots and see the bigger pattern.
The data here is crystal clear. During this golden age, law enforcement priorities were just somewhere else. Massive resources were poured into policing nonviolent drug offenses, especially in minority communities. Meanwhile, cases involving missing persons from those exact same marginalized groups, they received a tiny fraction of the attention. These weren't just cracks in the system. You could argue they were sanctioned hunting grounds created by the state's own neglect.
Now, to cope with a horror like this, we created a myth. It's the myth of the serial killer as a brilliant, unstoppable lone wolf. But the truth, the real truth, is far more damning.
We love to imagine them as these self-created, supernatural evil geniuses, right? But the reality? They were often arrogant, pretty inept criminals who were completely dependent on systemic failure and societal apathy to continue what they were doing. They weren't unstoppable. The problem was, we just failed to stop them.
And when you look at the actual cases, the myth just completely falls apart. The media sold Ted Bundy as this charming, brilliant law student, but he was really a chronic underachiever who dropped out. Or Dennis Rader, the BTK killer. He was seen as this meticulous, untraceable predator. How was he caught? After arrogantly asking police if a floppy disk could be traced. They lied, said no, and he sent one in. Bam, arrested. Their real power wasn't intellect. It was our own systemic inability to see what was right in front of us.
See, by framing them as monsters, as something other than human, we kind of absolve ourselves of any responsibility. But they aren't an alien species invading our world. They are a dark harvest of the American experiment. They are a diagnosis of our deepest cultural sicknesses.
We built this factory. We laid its bricks with our myths, powered its engine with our fears, and quality tested its product with our indifference. The question that now remains is not how this happened, but why we allowed it. And the most terrifying answer of all may be that, on some level, we needed its product. Not the killing, but the killer, a designated monster onto whom we could project our collective sins, allowing us to pretend for a little while longer that the rest of our civilization was sane.
You have been listening to The Testimonial on America as a Serial Killer Factory, the cultural alchemy that manufactures serial killers. Follow us on social media @The Testimonial for updates and to join the conversation. If you believe a topic deserves a testimony, let us know.